It's the week ending Saturday the 18th of December, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen the first person in the UK confirmed to have died from the Omicron variant, the highest ever temperature recorded in the Arctic, and Sir Lewis Hamilton controversially losing his F1 champion title but winning a knighthood for services to motorsport. But we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the week's digital team is Kate Samuelson from Hong Kong, the indomitable Mr. Abdulwahab Tahhan, and we're joined as well by the boss man, Holden Frith. And Holden, you must be so disappointed you haven't been able to put your hand in your pocket and safely stage our Christmas party this year, but it's so kind of you right now on the podcast to agree to personally fund it for January instead. A slap-up meal for all of us. How kind. What a boon to the struggling hospitality sector. And a pay rise as well, you say? Merry Christmas. OK, Abdul, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
The Home Office doesn't understand where people are coming from.
Bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, introduces the most significant overhaul of our asylum system in over 2 decades. Our bill will bring new comprehensive, firm but fair, a long-term plan which seeks to address the challenge of illegal migration head-on. Illegal migration is facilitated by serious organised criminals exploiting people and profiting from human misery. Illegal migration is counter to our national interest because these criminal gangs and networks are also responsible for other illicit activity, including drugs, firearms, serious violence. And if left unchecked, it is a risk to our country and our national interest.
Home Secretary Priti Patel speaking in quite a heated debate in the House of Commons this week. Abdul, what's going on?
Well, in the House of Commons, they were debating a new immigration law. It's going to be a law, of course, if it passes by the House of Lords. This new immigration bill will give the Home Office a lot of power, and it is intended to stop asylum seekers from arriving illegally to England, because this bill gives the government or the Home Office the power to send people to jail for 4 years if they arrive in the country illegally.
Yeah, this is the Nationality and Borders Bill.
Yes, this is the Nationality and Borders Bill, which has two kind of parts. The first one is to stop asylum seekers from arriving illegally to the UK and give the Home Office the right to send them to jail for up to maximum 4 years, and the right to process asylum seekers in a third country, not in England. And the other part, give the Home Office the authority to strip those who are naturalized from their nationality, from their UK nationality, because UK nationality and citizenship, according to the government, is a privilege, not a right.
So hold on. So when you say strip them of their UK nationality, this is people who have dual citizenship, is it? So they're people that come from another country and then get British citizenship. You can take the British citizenship away? Or is it applicable to people who just have British citizenship?
This applies to people who have dual nationalities and dual citizenship, even if you don't have one. In the case of Shamima Begum, the government assumes that she's a Bangladesh citizen because of her parents, because her parents are from Bangladesh, even though she was born and raised in England and she had never been to Bangladesh. So this applies to non-white people and people from a minority background and immigration background. So it doesn't apply to you, Olly.
Well,
I would assume.
It could apply to white people, couldn't it? If white people had a parent, basically, that was from another country. But you're right to say that in an analysis of who it affects, the New Statesman suggested that 41% of non-whites are likely to be eligible for deprivation of citizenship, compared with just 5% of whites. So in practical terms, Holden, it seems to me this is unlikely to be applied to anybody who isn't already the kind of person who most people would indeed like to see kicked out of our country, your Shamima Begum type individuals. But the discourse turns to who is eligible and who isn't. And then some people are being seen by the state as more British than others.
Yeah, I have a feeling we might all agree on this one. So I have tried to look quite hard for arguments in favour of what the government's doing. And while I do think that removing citizenship feels wrong, and it feels particularly wrong given the people this is likely to apply to. There definitely does seem to be a gap in the legal system for people who've committed the sorts of very serious terrorist offences you're talking about abroad, and specifically if they've been committed in ISIS-controlled territory or parts of Syria, where you're not going to get any cooperation on evidence gathering from the government. And so it's really hard to prosecute those people in the UK and make those charges stick. And so, there's clearly a public frustration with the idea of people who have gone abroad. They've perhaps fought on behalf of ISIS. They may have killed British soldiers abroad. They may have killed Syrian civilians abroad. And then because they do have British citizenship, and because it isn't really viable to prosecute them in the UK, it seems as if they can just come back home with impunity and resume their lives, and perhaps pose a threat to people here too.
Except in the case of Shamima Begum, Kate, she hasn't been able to come back to the UK, and that's under the current laws. So if you're worried about very extreme, rare cases like that, why make a new law?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that Shamima Begum hasn't been able to come back to the UK because she's been stripped of her citizenship. At the time, the government argued that even though she didn't have a foreign passport, she wouldn't be made stateless because Bangladesh, which is where she was born, considers anyone born to a Bangladeshi parent to be a citizen from birth into the age of 21. And she's certainly not the only British citizen to have been treated this way. A recent report from Reprieve, which is the non-profit organisation of lawyers and investigators, said that 20 families have been stranded in northeast Syria, most of whom had their citizenship revoked or removed. So certainly she's not the only person to have faced this.
So again, if that's done under the existing law, why amend it? What's the additional power, do you think, that the British government are keen to find?
So what's different about this bill is this clause called Clause 9, which is being introduced, and it's particularly contentious. It was quietly added to the bill, and it was actually passed just with 9 minutes of debate in the House of Commons. But it actually gives the government the power to strip individuals of their citizenship without prior notice on very broad grounds. For example, if the authorities don't have a person's contact details, or in the interest of national security, or in the public interest. And these categories, especially the public interest one, are so broad that they are pretty much meaningless. How does the government define the public interest? And as the Guardian said, could that include displeasing the government of the day, even if no crime is committed and no law is broken?
And is that the clause, Abdul, that concerns you?
Well, to be honest, no, and it's not about being notified. It's about creating a two-tier system for British nationals who, for example, for you would never worry about being stripped out of your nationality because Britain is your home. But for me, I'm a naturalized citizen. I paid my taxes and I paid my fees to become citizen. And then the Home Office can strip me of that. By the way, if they do that, do they refund me? Pay me back the money I paid to become citizen and all my taxes? I don't think so. But that's another topic. But what really annoys me is that you would create a two-tier system, and this would affect people's mental health and people's livelihood. Because in order for me to become British, one of the things that I had to do is to take this Life in the UK test, which teaches me about British life and British history. And I asked my British friends who were born British and who are white to take this test, and they all failed it. So I know more about Britain than them, according to the Home Office. And yet they would be British and they will never be stripped out of their citizenship. But I would. And this is giving me nightmare.
But what is the appropriate action to take, Abdul, on people who do pose a serious threat to national security? Or you don't. But the government have to decide, what do we do when someone who we've granted citizenship to then actually poses a serious threat to our national security and they have dual citizenship? What do you think the appropriate thing to do would be, if not strip them of British citizenship?
Well, take account of being accountable for your citizens. This is one of your citizens, right? This person of interest is British person. If this person is British citizen, then the UK should be accountable for their citizens, just like every other country. The UK is the only country that strips people of their nationality. No other country that I know of when I was doing my research that does that. So what they can do, just like other countries, they take back their citizens and they try them and put them in prison, and then they do time.
I mean, I suppose the thing is, Holden, that although on paper I can understand the outrage that there is about this, it's just one person. It's just the Home Secretary who gets to make the decision on whether or not someone gets their citizenship revoked. In reality, surely the checks and balances are with us. They're with the media, or social media at least. You know, if a real injustice is done, people will complain.
I think that's true. And this really came to prominence with Shamima Begum, because I think hers is the case where it's hardest to make the case that she is a threat to national security. She's certainly guilty of foolishness and dangerous foolishness, and she said some very stupid and potentially dangerous things, but the idea that she is a threat to the United Kingdom's national security is absurd. And I think that point you mentioned, that this comes down to the Home Secretary to decide who would be stripped of their citizenship, is the part of it that bothers me much more than the recent change to the law, which is about notification. The introduction of that law actually dates back to 2006. It was in response to the long attempts to deport Abu Hamza and other similar clerics who, for various reasons, could not be prosecuted in the UK, but because they were UK citizens, could also not be deported. And so while I think it was, that was clearly a response to public pressure, but that's exactly why it's a risky thing to do, to put all that power in the hands of a politician. There is certainly the option to challenge that in court, and the Shamima Begum case has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. But I think the change that I would make to try and fix this is not to eliminate it entirely, but to put it in the hands of the court to begin with. So the government would have to go to judges, make the case, and then if the judges agreed that the case was valid, then you could prevent people returning to the UK.
And what actually happens to people, Kate, when they're made stateless? What are the consequences of that?
Being made stateless is a really serious thing to happen. It's been described as one of the most egregious actions that a government can take, because it essentially deprives people of all their rights. In other words, they're made an unperson. They have no protection, they have no home, they have no legal status. And currently, as Abdul was saying, no other country can make its own citizens stateless by depriving them of citizenship without notice. So what the UK is proposing is really, really serious.
The Home Office gave a statement, actually, to the New Statesman on this. They said, removing British citizenship has been possible for over a century and is always a last resort against the most dangerous people to protect our national security and public safety. It is rare, cannot leave anyone stateless, and always comes with a right to appeal. This change is simply about the process of notification and recognises that in exceptional circumstances, such as when someone is in a war zone or informing them would reveal sensitive intelligence sources, it may not be possible to do this. Does that give you any peace of mind, Abdul?
Not at all, because the Home Office assumes that I'm a dual national and I cannot go back to Syria. I don't have my nationality. I don't have a Syrian passport, but the Home Office believes that I'm a dual national. So if they strip me of my citizenship, and they wouldn't even notify me, I would only find out about it when I'm about to travel at the borders. And this is really worrying me.
Do you think the bill will be passed?
100%, because it's now in the hands of people who we did not elect but appointed by the Tory.
Holden?
I'd say that the House of Lords is probably more likely to unpick this than the House of Commons, but whether it will or not, I'm not sure.
Kate?
So even though the UK government is saying that it won't make anyone stateless, it is important to note that the law doesn't require that a person who's stripped of their British citizenship has to be able to end their statelessness by acquiring a foreign citizenship. In other words, the government just has to have reasonable grounds for believing that they could acquire another nationality, but there doesn't have to be a guarantee that they're going to be able to achieve that. That's seen in the case of Shamima Begum, for example, who, as I mentioned, did have dual citizenship with Bangladesh, or she did have a Bangladeshi passport, but there's a kind of almost grey area in a way in that she can't go back to Bangladesh because they've said that they would execute her. So she essentially has been made stateless by the British government.
Okay, Holden, you're up next after this. Okay, Holden, your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Why some gift horses really do need a trip to the dentist.
Donated by the United States government, according to its health minister. Osagie Ehanire said the vaccines arrived on Sunday and were undergoing validation by the country's drug regulator. He added that the doses will be distributed to the local states once they are certified fit for use.
Reuters reporting on some COVID-19 vaccines arriving in Nigeria in the summer. Holden, what happened this week?
Yeah, this is a depressing one, I'm afraid. What happened this week is that we had confirmation from the Nigerian government of reports that started to emerge last week that Nigeria had a large number of COVID vaccines that were about to pass their expiry date. Ministers confirmed on Monday that, in fact, almost 1 million doses of COVID vaccine were about to expire and would have to be destroyed before they could be used.
Is there no room for movement when it comes to the expiry date, not even by a few days?
No, this seems to be an absolute cut-off point. And I think that's probably one of the many questions that this story emerges, is that, you know, when you're looking at a balance of risks, is it really the best solution to throw away these vaccines that have a shelf life of 6 months in the fridge? We're talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine here, not the Moderna batch we heard about in the clip. So these vaccines can be stored in the fridge for 6 months, and is it really the case that we can't extend that shelf life by another 2 weeks and use those vaccines to give some protection?
But the bigger question, I guess, Kate, is why aren't they being taken up in the first place? And I suppose the two most obvious options are either people don't want them or they can't get them to them in time.
Yeah, those are definitely major factors. On average, 7.5% of people across African countries have been vaccinated, which is just so much lower than Europe and the US in particular. And there are various reasons, lack of capacity in terms of medical staff who can actually deliver the shots, especially to, the millions of citizens who live in rural, hard-to-reach areas. There's also a lack of equipment, so in Nigeria, for example, the underfunded health system really lacks everyday supplies like cotton swabs and also syringes, and a really specific syringes needed, for example, to deliver the Pfizer dose. So that's another issue that they're facing. And also vaccine hesitancy is a really big issue. A study commissioned by the Africa Centres for Disease Control and Prevention on COVID vaccine perceptions in 15 countries in Africa indicated that a really significant proportion of people had concerns around the safety of vaccines. And on average, around 20% of respondents said that they would not have a vaccine. And I think that vaccine hesitancy is a major reason why for some countries it's actually better to get rid of the doses rather than give them out when they're past expiry, as kind of counterproductive as that might seem to people listening. In Malawi, when people became aware from reports in the news that some vaccines were being given out just before they expired or having just expired, it really the country's vaccination program really suffered a big setback. People became really concerned about being given out-of-date doses, and actually, as I said, it kind of had a real negative effect. And that's why when Malawi had more vaccines that were expiring, they actually destroyed them in public, saying that the benefits of destroying them far outweighed the risks in terms of damaging the vaccine rollout.
Yeah, I mean, there was this big international effort, Abdul, by richer countries to pledge vaccines to poorer countries. They actually failed to reach the target they initially set. But nonetheless, clearly, there are millions of vaccines that aren't being used. I wonder if that money got put into the procurement of the jabs, but actually perhaps some money should have been put into fighting these other battles, making sure there's a distribution network, making sure the hospitals are equipped, making sure that you've got messaging to tell people it's safe to take.
That's totally, that's absolutely true, because if in order to deliver the vaccine, you need infrastructure, you need a system that works, you need data, you need to know where people are and how they're getting there. For example, what's happening in the UK now, the website to register to get your booster shot has crashed, according to the government, because of the high demand. And we're talking about England, the UK, when we have the system in place. So imagine if you're talking about African countries where they might not have the infrastructure in order to deliver these shots. This is on one hand. On the other hand, the actually destroying vaccine doses happens every day. According to data collected up to August in the United States, up to 1 million doses had been destroyed, because on daily basis there are some doses that get destroyed because they are left in a room temperature for far too long. So at the end of each day, these doses need to be destroyed. So the fact that these doses get destroyed on daily basis while other people get deprived of these is something something happens on daily basis.
I think the other thing it's important to mention here is that Nigeria says the reason that these particular doses have expired is because they had a very short shelf life when they arrived in Nigeria. And COVAX, the international effort to share vaccines from richer countries to poorer ones, has said that it has seen some countries using COVAX as a way of essentially dumping vaccines that are about to expire into this program, and then claiming the good publicity from having been a donor while actually giving very little chance to use them. This is slightly complicated in the Nigerian case because it seems that the Nigerian government was aware that these vaccines had a short shelf life and had asked for them anyway, because it had hoped it would be able to use them before they expired, but it then turned out that it didn't have the logistics in place to get those out. So there's a lot of different factors that have all come together here, and I think it is a case of both the supply issues, demand issues, and then the logistics of actually connecting those two have all gone wrong.
Demographics as well, Kate, because you're talking about, in the case of Africa, quite a few countries where the demographics are just very different to Western Europe. You've got a lot of younger people who may already have had COVID and aren't worried about passing it on to older people because there just aren't so many older people about.
Yeah, I'm sure demographics are playing a part in this as well. I mean, some other countries in Africa, for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, they actually returned doses that they couldn't use. They asked COVAX and UNICEF to take them and redistribute them. And they also sent them to some other countries, including Ghana and Madagascar. But obviously, that's not always possible. If there is a really short amount of time until the vaccines expire, sending them back and then getting another country to administer them, there's just not going to be enough time for that. And following on from Holden's point, it's interesting to see that now the WHO and the Africa CDC, they're calling for donated vaccines to have a minimum of 2.5 months of shelf life remaining before they arrive in the benefiting country, to just reduce that logistical burden on the already really stretched health services. And they're also asking for donor countries to be made aware at least a month before they're delivered of a vaccine delivery, so that they have time to prepare and plan as well.
Is there some sense, I'm just asking Abdul, this might be just completely wrong, but do you think there's some sense in some of those countries where, you know, they had Ebola, they have problems with HIV, that COVID isn't as big a threat to them psychologically as it is for us? It's just another thing.
COVID is really serious a problem in a lot of first world countries, because pretty much life is great otherwise. But take a look at Syria, for example, where it's torn by war and very few people have been vaccinated. Pretty much, I know some people who are still in Syria, they don't really care about the vaccine because they're living life, it's fine. If they get it, they don't think it's serious. If they don't get it, well, their life is going on. They don't have lockdowns. They're going through their life on a daily basis like there's no coronavirus. So why should they take a vaccine that, you know, kind of has been accelerated in order for people to use? So, and they're really difficult to get, and you know, it's not really available. So yeah, in other countries, coronavirus is not the main concern for people.
And when you said this is a depressing story, Holden, it's difficult to see how you can really say anything else in conclusion, because, you know, we've been told so often that it's almost a cliche that nobody's safe until the whole world is safe. And then that leads a lot of people in the West to say, well, we need to do more. We need to make sure the poorer countries in the world have the vaccine. But it seems like even when they have the vaccine, it isn't reaching people. And therefore, it's difficult to see how we turn a corner on this.
It is, but I think I also wouldn't want to completely undermine the job that COVAX is doing. You know, I think if you had, it looks like they're on course more or less to distribute 800 million vaccines in Africa by the end of this year. We are at the stage where more than half of the world's population has received at least one dose of vaccine. If this time last year you had posited that as a potential outcome for this year, I think you'd have probably said that was a good place to be in. But it is, I think this is another example of where the headline figures don't tell the whole story, and what seems to be, and perhaps what was the most pressing question at the beginning of this year, in terms of just produce the vaccine, get as much of it out there, that we're now at the stage where that isn't the principal hold up in terms of getting vaccines into populations. It is much more about the logistics, and that's a more difficult problem. But as you say, it is a problem that all of us depend on. It's not just the poorer countries that will suffer if we can't get vaccine coverage up as high as possible, as quickly as possible everywhere.
Yeah, I suppose in a sense, surplus vaccines is a better problem to have than no vaccines. Okay, Kate, I'm coming to you next after this. Kate, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
An Amazon application sent alarm bells ringing for privacy campaigners.
Home security starts at your front door. The Ring Video Doorbell features HD video, two-way talk, and customizable motion detection, which alerts you when anyone steps onto your property.
Hi there, what can I do for you?
Is this 217 Pine Street?
No, I think you're in the wrong place.
Sorry.
Ring puts home security in your hands and makes it easy to watch over your property. With the Ring Video Doorbell, you're always home.
Why didn't I get that voiceover job? An advert for Ring Video Doorbell from a few years back, because, Kate, these are not new. I've had one for a few years. So what is the story this week?
So it was revealed that the tech giant Amazon is working on a visitor recognition system for video doorbells, which Amazon is a world leader in selling, which can recognise regular visitors and alert homeowners when an unknown person, animal or car enters the area. And the system can analyse faces, hair colour, height, weight, clothing, as well as the make and model of vehicles. And it can compare footage with stored images and trigger alerts when there's an unknown guest on the premises. This is all according to documents filed by Amazon at the European Patent Office, which were acquired by the Sunday Times. And a patent for the application was also granted approval in the US in October. And this is interesting because the machines don't currently have facial recognition capabilities, unlike some rival products, and privacy campaigners are essentially worrying about what this means.
Yeah, because Amazon own Ring, don't they now? And they put out a statement that I saw quoted in the Mirror saying they don't use facial recognition in devices currently, and the features in the patent are not, quote, in development or in use. Kind of think, well, why would they file for them then?
Yeah, there are lots of question marks over this, and you're right, Amazon do own Ring. I think Ring was actually the first video doorbell. It was pitched to Shark Tank, which is basically like Dragon's Den in the US, back in 2013, and it only had one interested offer, which the entrepreneur behind Ring then rejected, and then it was later acquired by Amazon in 2018 for a reported $1 billion, and the industry the industry has completely boomed since then. Sales of smart doorbells increased 58% from 2019 to 2020, and 1.4 million of these devices were sold last year. As the New York Times said, which I thought was brilliant, they said millions of Amazon customers are using Amazon cameras to watch Amazon contractors deliver Amazon packages.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it, Abdul? Because, I mean, at the moment, for the last 2 years, one of the most frequent visitors to my house has been Amazon delivery people. And, of course, Ring, if it did have facial recognition, would be able to discount those people because it would know who they are because it knows what's being delivered. So actually, it could be quite useful for the general public. So that all of the delivery people get discounted. Anyone who's a bit suspicious, i.e. someone who isn't in your family or friendship group, you get an alert saying you've got someone new at your door. That could be quite a welcome feature, couldn't it? What's the drawback?
It's a very good system to have, and it has helped showing evidence to a lot of crimes that been happening on the streets. In the case of Sarah Everard, we got some video footage from one of these door videos. But the problem is that it's all about storing data and who has access to the data. So it's the data security concern. It's not the filming. but who has access to the data and sharing the data with the police. For example, in the United States, the police has been distributing these videos or these devices in places where there's high rate of crime, and the police has access to these videos. So this is one of the security threats that people have. Another security threat that has been reported, that with Amazon, the people who have access to data is, I think, a company in Ukraine, according to what I've read. Now, I'm not really sure if that's true, because I didn't see any comment from Amazon on it. But if that is true, then there are concerns about who oversees the data and who has access to data and what can they do with that data.
Holden.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that the police don't have direct access to this footage. It's not as if they're monitoring...
In the UK?
In the UK or in the US, actually. It's what they do. They have a system where they can request footage if they have an interest in it. And whether you hand it over or not is up to you. But I do agree that it creates a sense of obligation. You know, if you get an online alert from a police officer saying this crime was committed in your neighbourhood, if you give us the footage from your doorbell, we can do something about it. That is quite different from you as an individual seeing something and then deciding to tell the police about it. But I think this new development, this new patent, if you added facial recognition to that, you do then start to get into an area where there's a lot more concern about, you know, sort of genuine state surveillance type network building up. Because, you know, again, if it's only individual householders setting up profiles and saying, you know, we live here, this Amazon delivery person is a regular visitor, we'll put them on the safe list, that might be one question. But you could, in this sort of step-by-step approach, you could easily imagine the police saying, well, we've got this photo of a prolific burglar in your area, let us upload this image to all of your doorbells, and then you do have a sort of panopticon system of every householder looking out for suspicious characters.
Okay, so then we're in a Minority Report situation, Kate. Is that the concern, that preemptively the police might say to Amazon, take this photo of someone who's previously committed burglaries. If they go visiting anyone's house, send us an alert before a crime is committed because they're suspicious. I mean, I agree that's all quite dystopian, but that's quite a few jumps on, isn't it, from your phone telling you all mum's here?
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound like something that's happening, you know, in the immediate future. But I think the concerns about facial recognition are really genuine. And I think, you know, you have to look at the data to see that although facial recognition algorithms are generally really accurate, there's studies that show that they have divergent rates of error across demographic groups. So the poorest accuracy is consistently found in Black women aged 18 to 30, and darker skinned females have error rates up to 34% higher than lighter skinned males. So there is this kind of problem with facial recognition, that it's biased. It has these racial and gendered biases.
But that's to do with sample size, isn't it? It's to do with who they've monitored when they've developed the product. And if you put this into every Ring video doorbell, actually lots of Black women would be on it. So, I mean, then it would learn much more quickly and that would equalise, wouldn't it?
I suppose, but the problem also extends into the kind of products that go with these smart doorbells. So, for example, Amazon has... in the US, it has this app called Neighbours, which accompanies the Ring app, where people share information about kind of crime and security in their communities. But basically that just ends up with people kind of posting photos saying, oh, this kind of dodgy looking person walked past, does anyone know who they are? And actually data shows that this really exacerbates racial stereotypes and profiling, apps like these. And actually some studies have found that the majority of people being reported as quote unquote suspicious have been people of colour on these sort of apps. And another point is that this kind of surveillance and the use of these apps actually gives this really false sense of crime being on the rise, and actually crime rates are at their lowest for decades.
I mean, these kinds of concerns always get voiced, don't they, Abdul, whenever a technology company evolves to include an update like this. And yet it seems to me when the public actually start using these things, whether it's Alexa listening to them in their kitchens or Apple registering what their face looks like so that they can pay credit card bills slightly quicker, the convenience outweighs the concerns. People actually like it and they're prepared to give up those liberties.
I think it's a new technology and there are a lot of concerns about it. I totally understand, but it is not illegal to film outside your home. It's just like dash cameras. Dash cameras, when they were first introduced, I'm not sure if there were a lot of people who opposed to them, but now pretty much everyone uses them, and they're very good to keep you safe in any car accident.
Yeah, but the footage doesn't stay with you, does it? In this case, for it to interpret that your mum's come to the door, it's had to bounce it around the world to a big server in a different country. So it's not quite the same as a dash cam.
No, but this is a choice individuals have to make for themselves. It's just like when you buy a phone and it has face recognition to unlock, you can do it, or you can decide not to do it. And this is the same for installing these kind of devices. The government does not tell you you have to install them and give us the data. This is something people do on their own, and if it's not illegal, why not?
I think on the question of whether or not this will make things more convenient is also an open one, just because facial recognition isn't necessarily all that reliable. So I think if you are relying on a doorbell to flag potentially suspicious people, you may end up with so many false alerts that you end up turning off the technology entirely. We have a non-facial recognition video doorbell, but then a security camera in the house that we installed after a burglary a few years ago. And in theory, that is able to recognize faces, but it's convinced that my partner is actually 3 people. And so it regularly flags him as an intruder. So we ended up actually just switching off that part of it, because although it understood that I was one person, it hadn't quite figured out him.
Okay, so that's a practical concern, but if it worked and it was convenient, because the thing I'm imagining it would actually be used for is, you're in a business meeting and you haven't got time to open the app, look at the camera, talk to the person. So instead, the notification would come up and it would simply say, John's at the door. And you think, oh, John, okay, I do need to speak to John. Whereas if it said, I don't know, Betty's at the door, you'd be like, I'm going to see Betty later. It's fine, I'll ignore it. I mean, that's what it's for, isn't it? It literally is caller ID, but with faces. You can see that being quite useful.
Yeah, I think so, and particularly as we hopefully at some point get back to working in the office again, and we've all got used to ordering stuff from the internet while we've been at home, and if you could be away from home and tell the Amazon delivery person that it's fine to just leave it in the recycling bin and you'll pick it up later, then that would genuinely be maybe that is a benefit worth giving up our civil liberties for.
Yeah. Hands up who's been using their video doorbell when they're actually in the house to pretend that they're not, so they don't have to actually speak to someone face to face. I suspect that's going on more. You're in the bathroom. Yeah, I'm away, actually. My thanks to Holden, Abdul and Kate for spying all the best stories this week. And having beautiful faces too. I wish you could see them. Remember, you can follow this show for free and get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have found us today via a Spotify playlist, just tap Go to Podcast and then tap Follow now. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Sophie King at Rethink Audio. Have a great Christmas. We'll be back on New Year's Eve to unwrap the year. Until then, bye-bye.